So I've been invited to speak about stress in the workplace. I've created a short presentation and I've called it Issues, Defenses, Disorders, and then there's work. Because it is such a big topic, as a therapist, I thought we would chat a little bit about the emotional process of being stressed and how we consciously and unconsciously cope with this and how it can get expressed in the workplace. Okay, so our conscious selves invite authenticity, but we have a variety of emotional defense mechanisms that we all employ. These are completely normal. We have our emotional defense mechanisms. They basically help us to protect our sense of selves and our identities. They help us manage the everyday tyrannies of life. They help us protect ourselves from the fear of being rejected by people, and it's also to reassure ourselves that we are actually coping and managing in a very stressful environment. So in any average social interaction, we have an unspoken rule. Don't notice my defenses and I won't notice yours. Okay. Now the difference between an emotional issue and a defense, they can be the same thing, but an issue is a difficulty, some kind of problem with which we are currently struggling. It could be a really big problem like addiction, and in all the
Dr. Jody, can I please intervene? I think on the slides we are not able to see it. Dean, can I request for your assistance if you can zoom in the slides a little bit?
Okay. I see.
Is it okay now, Veena?
Yeah, still a little blurred. We are not able to see it.
Okay, let's go back. Maybe put it over there.
Yeah, better.
Is that better? Okay, yes. Tribuna. Okay, so this was my first slide. So should I move on from the first slide? And let's go on to the next one, which is the difference between an issue and a defense. So an issue is a difficulty with which we are currently struggling. We all have our issues. It's perfectly human to have issues. I will explain a little bit later about the difference between an issue and a diagnosis. So we have perfectionism, low self-esteem, maybe we have anger issues, maybe we're dealing with grief of a loved one or loss of some sort. An emotional defense, on the other hand, works to prevent us from feeling painful and difficult emotions from our issues. They also serve to maintain the status quo. So they generally help us to cope. Some other things we do to protect our issues, we can use humor, we can misuse substance, we can even abuse substance. And then we have the classic defense mechanisms like projection. Sometimes people worry a lot. We over-exercise. Some defense mechanisms are definitely healthier than others. So we employ our defense mechanisms when we are very stressed or in a state of shock or just overwhelmed in general. So defense mechanisms, especially the very big ones, usually requires a lot of emotional energy to do the job properly. So it can be exhausting to maintain. So here are some of the common psychological defenses, and you're probably familiar with some of them. So we have the first really big one, which is denial. So apparently denial is the most commonly used defense mechanism. Very easy to deny that there is a problem. So classic, no problem. What are you talking about? I'm absolutely fine. Then we have projection, which is, putting our own uncomfortable feelings onto another. There's suppression. Suppression is when we consciously keep our unpleasant feelings and thoughts from our mind. So we consciously say, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about my ex, I'm not going to think about if I was miserable as a child, just pushing that to the side or I'm pushing it down. We also have repression, by the way, which is when we unconsciously keep unpleasant information from our minds. That gets a little bit more complicated. Intellectualization is often used by quite intelligent people. So when we think about our feelings in a very kind of overly clinical or neutral way, so we basically can talk the feelings away or just think them away. But people who intellectualize a lot tend to get anxious in other ways. Dissociation is a defense often used to protect ourselves, maybe even from physical pain, where we actually engage. You physically almost feel like you're floating away from the stressful situation. Then there's regression, and I think we're probably all familiar with regression. If you've had a really bad day and you just don't feel like being nice anymore, and you snap at the waitress, or you have a little tantrum at home because the person you love was supposed to cook you your favorite meal and just hasn't, and you stomp off to the bedroom and you grumble and you maybe cry, or you just behave a bit like a child. For a lot of us, we quickly recover ourselves and we can apologize. We can say, gosh, I'm really sorry, I behaved a bit childishly there. So often, it's how you recover yourself when you know you've employed one of your defense mechanisms and you've possibly hurt someone else. The last three that I have on this page is humor, sublimation, and altruism. So those three are the so-called healthy defense mechanisms. So humor, if you can notice the irony or funny side of a situation, very healthy. Sublimation is, for example, if you have an argument with somebody at work or your partner, you go to the gym and you work out the stress in your body, or you go for a walk, or you go to an art class, or you play a musical instrument. So any activity that transforms the negative energy into something that helps you cope and calms your system down is sublimation. Then we have altruism, and those are, pretty much service to others, not in a manipulative way, but just really wanting to genuinely help people, and it's authentically done. That would be altruism. Okay, so how does this all play out? One of the aims of mindful living, because that's a really common term these days, is to replace our unhealthy coping mechanisms with healthier ones. However, under very stressful situations that you obviously find yourself struggling with at work, we are sometimes thrown into a less mature version of ourselves in which these issues and defenses play out a little bit more strongly. So we're faced with a couple of options. Because I always say, as adults, we're all responsible for our own feelings. Even if someone has deliberately hurt you, it's still our responsibility to look after ourselves and not engage in some very unhealthy behavior. So we have these choices. We can shut down, reinforce our defenses, become even more defended, or we just run away, the flight, fight, freeze, faint mechanism, or we can actually use the opportunity as a chance to look within and figure out, what is my role in this? What can I possibly do differently? How can I take better care of myself? Knowing there's a major presentation tomorrow, knowing that I'm struggling with fatigue, and there's an opportunity to actually try something different when you're very stressed. Other pitfalls, things we get caught up in doing when we are very stressed. We get overcritical of others, or we get overly helpful, or we just take everything over because we think, well, we can do it so much better, so it makes sense that you just give it to me because I can fix the problem better than you can. But obviously then this can give the message that you don't trust other people to do their jobs. And then also our ego or pride can obviously get in the way. On a physiological level, stress affects the body in so many ways. So I think we all have the information these days that mind, body, heart, it's all connected. If you are stressed, you can bring up pre-existing conditions to flare up even more in your body. If there's genetic vulnerabilities to say getting certain conditions, stress is the fuel to the fire. So we really do need to take care of our bodies, especially that we're living longer lives as well. So there's fatigue, changes in skin, narrowing of arteries, decreased nutrient absorption, problems in our gut, decreased immunity, hormonal imbalances, muscle protein breakdown. Stress is really insidious. And I'm sure you've had many talks by doctors on all the different sort of health conditions in the 21st century, the stress, sort of autoimmune related issues. Okay, so back to when you're trying to fix up your stress through overly focusing on what other people are doing wrong. So our autonomic nervous system, and that is the nervous system responsible for controlling your body functions, such as breathing, the heartbeat. This nervous system steps in when we get stressed. Because pretty much your brain knows, even if emotionally you still think you can control it, that it cannot control other people, and it will send you a distress signal, sweaty palms, racing heart. Maybe you feel hot and bothered. So this stress obviously will make you feel less free and controlled in your own body, which will affect your performance at work. This is then felt by others, sending you both into a negative spiral, and then it gets in the way of healthy communication and cooperation. Okay, so back to our issues and defenses. How do we develop these? All our particular coping mechanisms and our emotional wounds are mostly formed through exposure to common life experiences, such as serious illness, loss, childhood emotional abuse, neglect, betrayal. Managing versus processing and connecting with feelings. So I always tell my patients that there are two things we need to do with our emotions. On the one hand, we need to manage them. So you can't go to work and break down in meetings because your wife is angry with you. You can't go to work and sit there and be thinking all about, something that isn't related to the particular task at hand. We need to manage ourselves. So that means we push aside what we are carrying to work, what we are feeling, and we put on our sort of blinkers and we get into our work persona and we cope and we manage. But then we need to go home or leave work and we need to give a space to then process the feelings. So on the one hand, you manage your feelings. On the other hand, we need to process, feel, reflect, work through our emotions. That is how we get balance, and that's how we have a healthy emotional system with healthy defense mechanisms. So if you do more of the one, I think a lot of very successful people in the UAE, I see it all the time in my practice, we get very good at managing ourselves and we get very good at coping with our feelings. Not that good with connecting. So by connecting, again, I mean understanding, processing, working through. That's not the same as fixing our problems. It's giving them attention and hopefully they get fixed somewhere along the way. So when we can process our feelings, a space within us emerges, allowing the possibility of being present in another way with the issue, as opposed to using the same old defenses which may not be useful any longer. So remember, there may be negative and positive emotions, but they're not right or wrong. They simply are what we need to work through, depending on our own particular histories. So I'm choosing one issue to just elaborate on, and I think this is a very common issue again with expats and people living in the UAE, the issue of perfectionism. So regardless of our backgrounds, we have all had cultural childhood experiences that taught us we should try to be perfect. So perfection meant love and approval from our parents, and the experience of failure meant external criticism. You could do better. Why didn't you get 90%? Why you only get 80%? Or you're just being lazy. And feelings of misery from love and approval withheld. So conditional love. Because these interactions came from a time when the playing field was uneven, versions of these same old dynamics between individuals can erupt into power plays, and that gets played out in the workplace. So despite all our achievements as adults, we all still carry little pockets of self-doubt and this belief, erroneous belief, that perfectionism is actually possible. So the other side of perfectionism is blame. So the more disappointed, upset we get when things aren't going well, the more likely we are to either blame ourselves, which can make you depressed, or we blame something else and we get angry. And the natural response from the other when they're being blamed is to be defensive. So defensiveness, when we're not able to look within, is a way of simplifying our world and protecting us from the pain of actually acknowledging something within we don't like. So I know this is all very psychological, and this is where therapy comes into play. This is the type of work that I do, just help people look within and figure out what their issues are, so we know what we need to work through. So Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists, said that life calls not for perfection but for completion. I thought that was quite lovely. The concept of good enough. Perfectionism is a receding horizon. It never ends. You will never be perfect enough. So we need to understand and accept that being good enough is actually good enough. And sometimes we learn these lessons through struggling with our health. It could be autoimmune health issues, chronic stress, burnout. Or we can learn these lessons in gentler ways, such as the self-care, exercise, mindfulness, walks outside, developing our hobbies, making sure we have time for that. Perfectionism leads to mental illness, which is what we're going to go on to next. And high standards, holding high standards is very different. It is calculated and intentional, whereas perfectionism can become obsessive and lead to mental illness like depression and anxiety. Okay, now we get to mental diagnoses. So the example I've given you here today is the diagnosis of depression. So depression and anxiety are not real feelings. They are diagnoses. They are a cluster of symptoms that happens when our real feelings are shut down, when we cannot access what we really need to feel, when we haven't been able to process our emotions. Remember when I spoke about processing your feelings and managing our feelings. So when you've overly managed your feeling and you haven't allowed yourself to actually connect with your feeling, you actually are in danger of becoming mentally ill, which would be depression and anxiety is regarded as a mental illness. So this is the cluster of symptoms. You need at least 5 of these symptoms: a change in appetite, sleeping too much or not sleeping well at all, fatigue and low energy most days, more often than not, feeling worthless, guilty, hopeless, an inability to focus and concentrate, and sometimes just being preoccupied with, it just doesn't feel like my life has any meaning. So maybe not feeling actively suicidal, but just feeling like, what's the point of my life? And if a bus came and crashed into me right now, that's fine. So just kind of slowly giving up on life. So the important thing, the difference between depression and sadness or feeling down, is these symptoms need to cause significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Okay. So healthy ways of dealing with our issues. We spoke about humor, so exploring opposition without distress. So for example, creativity and humor, using our messages to communicate your ideas, not regard what is happening as fact, not taking everything personally, just trying to be a little bit more neutral about it. No one is right or wrong, to remember that you're all simply having different experiences, even through different cultural lenses, through having a different value system. We're all different. So the more different we are, the more important it is to communicate our way through these differences. So awareness of the other leads to our ability to respond to people and tolerate them, as opposed to being reactive. So as we realize, for example, if you're struggling with perfectionism, that it is very rare, very fleeting, and usually accidental, we can redirect our focus onto realistic improvement. So this awareness of our limitations also helps us show compassion to others. And a recognition and acceptance that mistakes are normal and they are a sign of growth. So there is a mindfulness exercise that perhaps you could try later if you have time in your day. Just take a few minutes out of your day and just sit and think about what issue you may be struggling with at the moment, and then just allow yourself to give your full attention to this issue. So usually we try to push it away, we try to not accept it or argue it away or talk it away, but to just invite in whatever you're struggling with, give it your full attention. And then when you've done that for a while, maybe ask yourself, what does this issue need for me to be able to let go of it or to work through it? And just for example, does it need my forgiveness? Does it need me to become more angry? Do I need to find courage to maybe work through it? Or does it actually need a goodbye? Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions. I hope that I gave you a little bit to think about, and I'm ready for any questions people may have. Maybe I can just give a quick example. So when I said what would be healthy ways of dealing with issues, so an example could be, you could say, if you in the angry defensive mode, you could say something like, "You're accusing me," and then the other person, you can get into a whole backwards and forwards and a whole kind of argument around that. Like, "No, I'm not. What are you talking about?" or the other person could respond with, I'm not sure I understand. Can you maybe explain what you mean in another way? So this is a way of sidestepping accusation and inviting a conversation as opposed to reacting and getting upset and feeling, feeling accused back. Okay, so I'm open for questions. I hope everybody hasn't gone to sleep. Vina, are you there?
Yes, Jody, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, you are able to change the slides?
Yes. Would you like me to go back to the first one?
Yeah.
Where would you like?
I will just wait for the audience to put the questions,
Okay.
so I can read out for you for the answers.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to elaborate on certain aspects or just answer general questions. So anything would be fine.
Dr. Jody, sorry. Going on to the first question, Dr. Jody, the first question is, what, as per you, are the alarm signs of, any mental disorders, or there is something which is not going right from a mental health perspective? What are the alarm signs?
So alarm signs are generally when the person is not coping and they're not just having one bad day. I'm just going back to my one example of a mental diagnosis. So each mental disorder has a cluster of symptoms. So anxiety would have a different cluster. But generally it is if somebody is not coping day after day for at least a few weeks, it is now becoming apparent to most people that this person is generally just not okay. And it's affecting the work. So sometimes they can still get the work done, even though the relationships with their colleagues are a little bit strained, the work is still happening. But I think once the work starts being affected, the person just really is not coping. And obviously coming in late, not being able to maintain deadlines, generally being miserable and unhappy and irritable. I think those are all alarm signs. And I would hope that in a workplace there are people who are, who can pick up signs like that and who are able to at least have a conversation with you to say, look, we've noticed over the last month you're just not yourself. Is anything happening that we can support you with? Would you like to talk about what's happening so we can maybe work out some leave or leave of absence? Mm-hmm.
Sure. So, Dr. Jody, very important question. Post-COVID, it was usually blamed with a lot of people that, there is something called brain fog for people who suffered through this. Can you elaborate something about it? How to go, were the symptoms and what should people do to come out of it?
Yes, I think, we're just realizing more and more that the long COVID is a very complicated, complex phenomenon, and it requires, I think, an entire intervention, in terms of lifestyle change, in terms of nutrition, in terms of sleep hygiene. Really it's kind of extreme self-care that is required, and really difficult if people have to still work at the same pace as they did before, 10, 11-hour work days. Sometimes even 9-hour work days would be too much, 8-hour work days. So I think if a doctor can diagnose that, an endocrinologist or even your family doctor, I think it's quite useful information for the work, for the company to know about that. And possibly, I'm not sure what can be done, but reduce the working hours or just even, I always say what we are aware of and what we can bring into a space of reflection is less likely to be acted out. So if there's acknowledgement of, I have long COVID, I have brain fog, I'm so sorry, I'm going to need to take an extra couple of hours or a couple of days with this presentation. I think people, will respond to that, hopefully in a compassionate way. And again, I don't work in a corporate setting. I work in a hospital where I think there's a lot of compassion. And I know that in the workforce, generally compassion is, if you have time to be compassionate, as opposed to it's an integral part of the system. And some companies are obviously more psychologically minded than others. But I think everything, these sorts of things are changing. So a lot of companies are offering, wellness seminars, well, like this one, for example, yoga lessons, counseling, and the medical insurances cover a certain amount of sessions with a psychologist, most of them. So I think just to acknowledge that you need extra support and that it's not a failure. It's completely normal. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal stressor.
Understood. Going to the next question, Dr. Jody, is how to increase the self-esteem and trust?
Sorry, Bina, can you repeat that? Something about trust?
Yeah, it is how to increase the self-esteem and trust.
How to increase something
self-esteem.
Okay, self-esteem. About 10 years in therapy. Increasing self-esteem and trust. Okay, so we all have our avenues to healing. And if we have issues like self-esteem and trust that we're struggling with, I think we need support. So we need to find our avenue of healing. It could be psychotherapy, it could be art classes, it could be reading lovely books, it could be taking up a musical instrument. Anything that helps you connect with yourself is going to be therapeutic. It could be swimming with dolphins. And we need to just know what medium we choose will intuitively help us look after ourselves better. And then that becomes healing in itself. So I think if we directly look at, okay, I need to increase my self-esteem, so I need to tell myself these positive thoughts every day, that won't necessarily work. So yes, positive thoughts do help, but we need to process why we are struggling with our poor self-esteem in the first place. It's a little bit like taking a pill to just mask the depression. So when we take, for example, antidepressants, it needs to be done in combination with therapy, because antidepressants will just help you cope better with the symptoms if you're not coping. But therapy helps you work through what caused you to become depressed in the first place and to discover healthier coping mechanisms. So low self-esteem, it's always as a consequence of some negative experience we've had. So we need to make sure we've healed that, or we've given it enough of our attention for the symptoms then to subside.
Now, going to stress, Dr. Jody, what do you think that someone who is stressed due to any situation or workplace, what are the stages which that person goes through till it reaches to any of the diagnostic kind of a mental disorder? So what are the stages would that person go through?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. I think some of us are more resilient than others, but that's also a tricky word because, we tend to look at, you just need to soldier on. So soldiering on and forcing yourself to cope is not resilience. It's not inner strength. It's actually can be really bad for your health. So to look at your coping mechanism, to look at your defense mechanism, if it's soldiering on and ignoring yourself in other ways completely, it's probably not going to be healthy and you're probably going to get burnt out quite quickly. So healthy resilience is, I suppose, having support. And again, a lot of the suggestions that people make are sort of in an ideal world. Sometimes we are here as an expat and we don't have support. So I guess we then need to find other ways, that sublimation I was talking about, the looking after yourself. So the better you can look after yourself, the less likely you are to burn out. Often though, we don't see it coming. So I think we need to know ourselves so well that we can sense, we can anticipate, if I do this and this and this and this and this, I'm going to burn out and I won't cope and I will collapse and go home and terrorize my family. So I need to pull back from that. I need to get some extra help with this. I need to plan a holiday at the end of that so I can recover from that. So it's a bit like, trying to prepare like an astronaut for what you need. And the more stress and responsibility you have, the more you need to also be responsible for yourself and look after yourself better. It's not healthy anymore to ignore our symptoms. So often we realize, like I mentioned earlier, we realize through burnout and fatigue that, oh my goodness, I actually wasn't looking after myself.
Okay, going to the next question, Dr. Jyoti, it is related to anger management. During the spur of the moment, when it's related to anger, what are the simple actions to do and eliminate rush or wrong reaction? What are simple things you think someone should do?
So I think when we are triggered, and remember I spoke about being reactive as opposed to being responsive. So we need to respond to a situation in a way that our frontal lobe is functional. So that's the area that in the front of our brain that's responsible for healthy decision making, higher reasoning, where we have a handle on ourselves. So we can get triggered, we can notice the trigger and sidestep it or walk away from it. Especially for somebody who's got a lot of unresolved trauma, they are quick to get triggered because then you're coming from a different place in your brain. And if we are really struggling with anger, then it's a sign that there's something that is unresolved that we need to pay attention to. But some basic tips would be, when you are triggered, I think there's something like, I'm not sure exactly how long, but something like 10 or 20 seconds we have to withdraw from the situation. Otherwise, once we are triggered, it's going to take at least 3 hours to calm down after that. So it's worthwhile noticing you're triggered, pulling back from it, and generally walking away is better than letting yourself erupt and then alienating people. So to walk away, actually, and then go and calm down, notice what you're feeling, try and understand what it is saying about the situation. It could be telling you that something very unfair is happening to you. You didn't get promoted, you should have, you're supposed to get a raise, your work was supposed to get acknowledged. So notice the anger, notice that it's telling you something important. Don't try and suppress it, but it's what we do about it that separates a mature response to a highly triggered emotional trauma response. Then you can go home and write an email and about what you're upset about and read it a couple of times, sleep on it. Often a good night's sleep. Honestly, I often just wake up in the morning and I have a good idea about life and I know that I've had a good night's sleep. And then your perception is just different. You might then see it as, actually it wasn't important, it really was inconsequential. Or you wake up and you think, okay, I really do need to deal with this. Today I'm going to arrange a meeting, or I'm going to write that email. So to give yourself time to never just react. It's not worth it, because your own stress levels get fired up and then your body's in a state of inflammation, and then you get all those, let's go back to all these issues. It's really not worth it.
Absolutely. I agree with that, Dr. Jody. I would want to share one of the story of my friend who had a very bad anger. It was really difficult for him to manage. So one of the things which he tried was while he was in a situation where there was a conflict, he wanted to react. He just calmed down. He wrote everything in a paper or a Word document, like you said, in an email. And he did not react the same day. He would read that paper the next day, and then on the third day, then he would read and decide whether the response is really required, and then decide upon.
Excellent. That sounds like he managed his emotion very well, but he also processed it, by writing down what you're upset about.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we tend to get into any one of these defense mechanisms. So projection, and making it somebody else's problem. And yeah, so there's all sorts of things people do. I mean, we just have to look at the aggression on the roads sometimes to see that people are not coping with their own feelings and they're not able to manage it. So managing your feelings is important, but you also can't push it away to the point that you ignore what clearly needs attention, because the longer, if you just stay in managing your feelings mode, you will also end up getting quite anxious or depressed.
Understood. So, Doc, going on to the part of anxiety, we all go through some phases of anxiety. It could be exam anxiety, it could be an interview anxiety, meeting anxiety, a short period notice, work to be completed anxiety. But it is a shorter notice, but certain anxieties actually go on to a panic mode. So what do you think? What is the right thing to do to overcome such anxieties?
Yeah. So just like depression, if the anxiety is so acute so that it just disrupts our normal day-to-day functioning, I mean, I've often had clients who get panic attacks while they're driving, or just before they go into a meeting, they start getting a panic attack. And it just, whenever we are so triggered that we have these acute feelings, our frontal lobes, basically our frontal brains are offline. We can't think clearly. So our frontal lobe gets hijacked and we just have these incredibly distressed feelings. When it gets to that point and you know yourself well enough to know that this is not who I am, this doesn't sit well with me, I'm not comfortable, I wake up and I'm feeling unhappy already or very stressed anticipating the day, then you know that it's probably you need to go and have it checked out. So probably to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist and work through whatever is stuck. So it could be that maybe you, a beloved parent passed away during COVID and you were so busy trying to cope that you really just didn't grieve, you didn't allow yourself to grieve. And all that grief is now stuck and it's manifesting as panic attacks or phobia. You suddenly become phobic of, I don't know, a cat or the dark, or, phobias are also our feelings being projected onto something that we feel we can control and manage. So I think to get that checked out, and if it's not just a week where you just worry excessively, but you know that with a good night's sleep or a nice weekend, you'll be back to yourself. And often anxiety and depression actually gets worse. It doesn't just go away by itself. So I think that can be difficult. And then people start learning to live with it, which I think is really not good either. Where it becomes normal for you to have a panic attack when you're driving, and you just start accepting it. But you're missing out on living a wonderfully healthy life, if you don't take care of yourself. But I think there's also still a bit of a stigma sometimes, to see somebody, a mental health practitioner. Some people are quite proud that they're in therapy. I mean, I have a lot of young clients who are all, it's very normal to be in therapy. So they talk about their fitness trainer, their therapist, their nutritionist. They have a whole kind of army of support. And I think the older generation tends to struggle with that more. They feel they need to soldier on. So we can learn from younger people and they can learn from us.
Doctor, there's this a question which I am not familiar to. Is there any term on psychology which is called conditional love part? Like, do you think it affects someone's relation in work and life? Can you put some light on that?
Yeah, that's a lovely question, actually. You know, the sort of highest, purest form of love is unconditional love. However, I think people have a misunderstanding that if you unconditionally love someone, it means you've got to put up with nonsense. So it's not the same thing. So we can love somebody unconditionally, but we still need our boundaries. So if we're going to be treated badly or shouted at or disrespected, you put your boundary. You know, you say that's not acceptable. I love you, but your behavior is not acceptable. So we separate our love for the person from their behavior. So with sort of good enough parenting, if your child has a tantrum, you don't withdraw your love, because then they develop that wobbly sense, that fragile sense of self. So you say, this is not okay, you need to go to your room until you've calmed down. When you're feeling better, I will come and call you for supper and we will have a conversation about this. So you don't try and reason with somebody when they're super angry, because they're already triggered. And like I said, once you're triggered, our physiology just won't calm down in order to be present, to actually listen properly. So like with a child, there's time out or whatever consequences, and you then go later and you say, okay, so what was that about? Why were you bullying your sibling? Or I guess we need to bring this back to the workplace. I noticed you were very irritable with the staff today. You know, a lot of people are upset. You seem very angry. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay at work? I mean, at home, how is your health? So having conversations to bring an issue into the realm of reflection is always useful. And I think workspaces need to create more conversations like that. So conditional love is you withdraw your love if somebody makes a mistake or doesn't behave in the way that you want them to behave, as opposed to I love you, but it's not okay to shout, or it's not okay to do this, or come home drunk. I'm just using very random examples. So you still have your boundaries. You don't, you know, put up with things just because you love the person. And sometimes we leave people because it's a dysfunctional relationship. We can still love someone and leave, or we can still love the place we work, but leave because maybe we're not getting that promotion we deserve, or we're not being acknowledged, or, you know, there's certain toxic energies that are just not useful to be around.
Understood, Doc. Doc, it's again, the question is, what is the strategy might be to get rid of anxiety in the work environment where management does not provide constructive feedback but only demanding? So it's related to the work pressure at work.
Yes.
How do we manage anxiety and stress? Because I think it is very important that at work atmosphere we cannot throw tantrums or anger. We have to manage certain mood of ourselves. We have to maintain. So how do we do that? What are the steps to manage the anxiety?
Pretty much the same response I gave earlier with anger. Whatever issues you have is your responsibility to work through. So as adults, we are all responsible for our own feelings. So if we find ourselves feeling anxious or angry or depressed or anything that feels dysfunctional and that's going to interfere with our work experience, we need to take measures to look after ourselves. And to manage it better, of course, the healthy defense coping mechanisms. So managing your anxiety does not mean becoming even more of a perfectionist. You know, remember what I said earlier about we can either shut down and reinforce our defenses or become even more OCD or perfectionistic or work even longer hours to cope with our anxiety. That won't fix the anxiety. It's about acknowledging there's something going on within me that I need to sort out, and I'm going to manage it with self-care. I'm going to manage it with, if there is a conversation I can have, I'll follow that route. If there isn't a conversation, I need to find another way to support myself. So I guess we can't rely on the workplace to create those spaces. We can maybe even suggest that the workplace holds spaces, creates spaces like that. You know, so to be, I mean, often we learn the most about other people's depression and anxiety. We've experienced it ourselves. So we can even suggest, look, why don't we have one wellness seminar a month, or why don't we bring in a yoga teacher or mindfulness teacher? So it's also up to us to try and make suggestions.
Doctor, since so many questions are related to work stress and anxiety, how to manage perfectionism, I would say, what are the key things you would recommend for leaders or managers to manage their subordinates? You know, how to manage?
Definitely, I think sleep is actually the foundation of good health. So I think for me personally, and I've noticed with a lot of my patients, if they're not sleeping well, apparently if you don't sleep well, you increase your anxiety by 40%. So having a good night's sleep, and again, not trying to be heroic and cut down on your sleep. Because if we manage to have a full night's sleep, we can actually cope better. I mean, it really is that simple. Good nutrition is very important as well. So for me, the 3 pillars of health is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. So exercise gives you those feel-good hormones, the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins, all those lovely hormones that stress drains us from. A very good multivitamin, and with vitamin B. Vitamin B is very good for helping us cope with stress. So if we are very stressed, our systems get depleted from nutrients. So even if we're eating well, we need to take supplements. So those are some of the very basic tips, but they're incredibly important. You know, sleep for me is actually the biggest one. I feel like I can cope with anything and everything if I've had a good night's sleep. And the minute I haven't, I can feel that I have to try harder. You know, you just have to put in more effort. So yes, and to know how much sleep you need personally. Some people need 7, some people need 9, some people need 6, but to not cheat on that is quite important. And I know a lot of people are rolling their eyes, because I know I used to see a lot of students, and sometimes they just sleep was the first thing to go. And then if you don't sleep, your body can't tell you what food it needs. You don't listen to your body's signals for, this is a difficult situation, here I need to pull back, here I need to manage myself.
Yeah, so Doc, again, going back to my question, the question is like, what should managers or leaders do in order to manage the stress or anxiety of their subordinates, how to keep the environment very calm, mentally healthy? What are the alarm signs they should be watchful about their subordinates? How can they as a helping hand for them?
I think so many people feel ashamed if they're not coping, and then they hide it. But the more you hide it, the more you push away the feelings, the more it becomes anxiety and depression. So, you know, it ends up catching up with us. So I think leaders of managers, CEOs, they have a responsibility to also be role models. So I think if they can model healthy behaviors. If you have a manager who is emotionally mature, who uses humor, who can have conversations with you, not just about your targets, and actually, asks you how you are and genuinely wants to know how you're doing, I think that is the first prize. And then if there are team meetings, just to check in, how are people really doing, and to actually be open to people's feedback. So genuine feedback, as in, I really feel that we are pushing for this particular deadline, and I just feel that if we do it this way, that we're going to end up with a very burnt out workforce, and that is just going to mean that the work after that is just not going to be good enough. So, people need to be able to see the benefits of actually self-care and managing stress better. They need to see the benefits, and often they're not open to change. I think so many businesses are stuck in the old way of doing things, and they're not prepared to try something different. So opening up to, wellness, some sort of wellness routine, or more empathically attuned conversations. It's, the status quo can be very fixed, and the status quo is a kind of a defense in itself, because it protects you from actually doing some of your own inner work, I guess.
Noted, Doc. So the key term which I pick up from what you advise is all about communication. It is that the more we communicate, where the leaders or managers feel there is a problem area, we bring in more of communication with the confidence that, they are there with them. Our workplaces can be more healthier.
Exactly. Yes. That's a lovely summary. Yes. Exactly.
Going back to, so we see a lot of anxiety around perfectionism or completion. That again goes back to what is expected from individual. So Doc, what is I would want you to explain your perspective as an individual. What would be our key steps, to manage perfectionism or completion? And from a manager's perspective, that each individual is different. The pace at which they work and the quality they work, everything can differ. So what do you suggest? What is your advice?
I think I'm a clinical psychologist, so I'm actually used to working with individuals, and I'm used to working with, I suppose, mental illness and trauma and depression and loss and all of that. I think an organizational psychologist, so these are psychologists trained to work and help people in the workforce. So I don't have the perfect answers. Well, listen to me, I'm even using the word perfect. I don't have maybe enough experience in the workforce to know what needs to change. I only see people coming to me at the end of the day when they're stressed, they're exhausted, they're not coping, they're looking for a new job. And yeah, so I have the sense that things need to change, but I don't have the perfect or the best or maybe the most helpful solutions, other than I think people need to speak up if they're unhappy, and when we can find our voice, we're also less likely to shut down. And I think for management to be able to give people space, so maybe something like, I know there's a lot of these sort of feedback meetings or performance evaluations. So perhaps if a manager actually spends even 5 or 10 minutes of those meetings really checking in with a person and getting to know them, and maybe asking particular questions like, what would you regard as your vulnerabilities? What do you need more support with? How can we best help you grow and learn from these so-called mistakes that you may have made over the last few months? I see that you're trying very hard in these areas, but in this area, it feels like I'm picking up something not sure if it's you trying to figure out how to still do it, or if you need support, and to maybe just reassure the person, if you need more support, we're more than happy to give you that. So they feel that it is an option. You know, sometimes they feel they need to figure it out themselves. If they feel that management is actually not just looking for a reason to fire them, because I think a lot of people who get anxious are also in a state of fear. A fear of losing their job, fear that there's a better person suited and that they're going to be, you know, not have their contract renewed. But I think then what we're just doing is we are, instead of helping people grow and develop and creating a happy workforce, or a relatively happy workforce, you know, happy is also a relative word, we just, there's this vicious cycle. So we want new, fresh energy, the not anxious, not mentally ill energy, but then our workforce, our dynamics will just create anxiety, and then the next person comes and they're fresh, and then we kind of break them down with all the stress. So I think to just look at whatever your workplace needs to grow. It could be completely, it could be around communication, it could be around individual talks, it could be around, yeah, you know, and also I think there could be managers that are not very possibly emotionally mature, and then that creates fear, and then nobody wants to speak up about a manager that's just bullied them. So HR, I think, plays quite an important role there. You know, I've had a lot of patients who end up getting their most emotional support from HR, like paradoxically. So it seems like HR needs to wear a few hats as well.
Sure. So there are quite a lot of questions, Doc. So I will pick a few questions, which is we have already, you know, discussed. Is high temper a sign of stress? Yes, doctor, it could be related to stress, and Dr. Jody already explained how to manage that. Is working up late a sign of work stress? I think working up late is our own choice. We make whether we.
I mean, it could be depression. You know, one of the symptoms of depression is sleeping, not sleeping at all, or sleeping too much, or sleeping at odd times. But you know yourself best, and to figure out, this is not usually who I am. I normally am up with the birds and I'm feeling inspired and motivated. So what's going on here? I wonder if I may be depressed. I had a breakup 2 months ago. Even though I chose the breakup, I haven't properly acknowledged it or grieved it. You know, you still need to process loss, even if it's loss that you wanted. You still need to go through processing it. So to be able to look at, what do I need to do differently? Or, okay, this is the work, there's unrealistic expectations. I had to work until 11 p.m. My manager messaged me at midnight. I'm waking up with anxiety. How do I manage this? I need to have a conversation and say, I'm so sorry, but I cannot cope if I have to work late 5 days a week. I wish I could. I wish I could be here 14 hours a day, if that would help. But I need to take care of myself, and I need to go home at a reasonable time. Maybe once a week I can work overtime, but we have worked overtime every night now for the past week, and my health is starting to suffer. So the more we speak up, the more managers and the people ultimately in charge realize that it's actually not useful. But I think the system, you know, we collude with the system by keeping quiet, by shutting ourselves down, by pretending to ourselves that we are actually coping when we're not.
Yeah, so Doctor, I would want to just share in a similar session we had a few months back. We had a specialist, and there was an incident which was shared. There was a patient who was going through, you know, a chronic stress and anxiety, was not able to cope up. And during the session, it was found that he was constantly sitting in the office for long hours, was not going home. And with the constant talks, it was realized that it's not just the work pressure, it is subconsciously, the environment to which we are going to. If the environment to which we are going, for example, it is home, it is family, it is not peaceful, or we are overloaded with responsibilities, we may subconsciously end up sitting long hours, which doesn't mean we are overworked. Means we subconsciously want to avoid that situation which we don't want us to.
Exactly, that's really very true. Also, people get addicted to work, so they get addicted to the highs and the lows and the adrenaline. And if you don't have a very strong self-esteem, or you don't feel that confident to start off with, work is where you get your confidence and your self-esteem, because you are productive, you're seeing yourself do amazing things, you're bringing lots of money in for the company, so you feel great about yourself. But that is not sustainable either. So we need to still cultivate our inner worlds. So when I work with, I think, expats in particular, very high functioning individuals, they cope very well, intelligent people, but their inner worlds are sometimes a little bit barren. They haven't given themselves attention. So one of my patients has a cancer diagnosis now, and it's giving him the ability to look at the way he's worked his whole life and realizing that this is not who I want to be anymore. I don't want to be that person, and I actually have no idea who I am separate to my work. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like, what I don't like. All I know is who I am when I work. I don't know who I am as a separate person. So always important to cultivate something, even if it's just for an hour here or there. A hobby, something that feeds our hearts and our souls, I think is so important. And those are not just relationships, those are activities. Relationships can sometimes end up being work as well. We go home and we've got to give our energy now in a different way. So I think, yeah, that's another topic. I think we're talking about that next month.
There are quite a lot of questions, which is, I think we have covered the gist of this session. We apologize if we are not able to pick individually each and every question, but we have tried our best to give a feedback or gist of your questions. Please let us know if you have any further queries. Should you want to visit Dr. Jody directly, you can visit Mediclinic. You can book your appointments directly by calling Mediclinic City Hospital or through the website. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time today. It was a very informative session. Thanks everyone for joining the session. Hope you enjoyed and the session was very informative for you.
And if it just gives people something to think about, something to mull over, then that's good. We can't just reinvent the wheel, but if we can take responsibility for ourselves and our own feelings and thoughts, that's an excellent beginning.
Absolutely. So, Doctor, I would want to reiterate, like the sessions, the idea of having these sessions related to mental health is to start with that mental health, like any other disease, is just a disease. There is a treatment. We have to take it out of mind that that's something not to be discussed.
Exactly. And I think it's completely normal. It's a normal response to an abnormal stressor in a situation. It's not something we have caused. We don't cause our own depression, our own anxiety, our own traumas. Life happens, and sometimes we are the victims of other people's dramas, or life being difficult, like during COVID, and we are not physiologically wired to cope with this amount of stress. So of course, I think 1 in 2 people probably get depressed at least at one point in their lifetime, and so many people in the UAE are anxious or highly anxious, and I'm not surprised. So yes, thank you for joining.